Sewer. A hull from antiquity should not still be a hull. Wood left in seawater is not simply an object sitting in a fluid. It is material inside a biological system, and in most of the world's oceans that system takes wood apart, which is why one line of reasoning, recorded in 1976, still reshapes how archaeologists think about an entire sea. In that year, Willard Bascom suggested that the deep anoxic waters of the Black Sea might have preserved ships from antiquity, because the typical wood-devouring organisms could not survive there. Not that the ships were tougher, not that the sailors built better. The proposal was about the water. And the central question of this episode follows directly from it. What exactly is doing the preserving, and how far can that explanation honestly be pushed? Start with what a hypothesis like that is actually promising. Bascom was not describing an artifact he had lifted from the seabed. He was describing a place and predicting what that place should contain. That distinction matters for how you weigh everything that comes after. A prediction about preservation is a claim about absence. It says that a specific destructive process is missing from a specific volume of water, and therefore that objects entering that volume should leave it looking far more intact than experience elsewhere would suggest. The promise was that the Black Sea might function as an archive rather than a graveyard. That is an unusually testable idea because it points to a depth, not to a legend. The depth is the hidden system in this story. At a depth of 150 meters, the Black Sea contains insufficient oxygen to support most familiar biological life forms. That single figure is doing an enormous amount of work. It draws a line through the water column and separates two very different worlds, an upper layer that behaves like ordinary sea, and a lower layer where the biological machinery of decay is largely missing. I want to be precise about the limits of the evidence used here. The record supporting this episode states that oxygen is insufficient at that depth. It does not, in the material available to me, explain the oceanographic process that produced the layering, and I am not going to invent one. The chemistry that makes the deep basin anoxic is a real and well-studied question. It is simply not part of the evidence chain I can verify in this pack. So the first attempt to act on Bascom's suggestion was not a dig. It was a redefinition of where to look. Marine archaeology, historically, has been shaped by what divers could reach and what conditions permitted. A hypothesis about anoxia inverts that logic because it says the most rewarding material should sit precisely where humans are least able to work by hand. Depth stops being an obstacle and becomes a selection criterion. If the anoxic layer preserves timber, then the shallow, well-lit, easily surveyed margins of the sea are the worst place to search for intact ancient hulls, and the dark, deep basin is the best. That reversal is the practical consequence of the idea, and it arrived before any confirming discovery. The turning point is straightforward, and I will state it at exactly the strength the evidence allows. Ancient shipwrecks have been found in the Black Sea, and they date to antiquity. That moves the 1976 suggestion out of the category of clever speculation and into the category of ideas consistent with the archaeological record. But consistency is not proof of mechanism. The supplied record establishes that wrecks from antiquity are present in that sea. It does not, in the material I have, tie each documented wreck to the anoxic zone specifically, or describe how well individual hulls survived. So the honest formulation is this: the prediction anticipated ancient ships in the Black Sea, and ancient ships in the Black Sea have been documented. The anoxia explanation remains the leading account of why, not a demonstrated fact about every wreck found there. The mechanism, as proposed, works by subtraction rather than addition. Nothing in the deep Black Sea is actively protecting wood. There is no coating, no sealing, no special sediment doing the work in Bascom's reasoning. Instead, one of the main agents of destruction is simply not present, because the organisms that consume submerged wood require oxygen that the deep water does not supply. Think of decay as a set of parallel processes competing to dismantle an object. In an oxygenated sea, biological consumption is fast and thorough, and it usually finishes the job long before slower processes matter. Remove that pathway, and timber's survival time is no longer set by appetite. It is set by whatever remains. That is the whole engine of the hypothesis, and it explains why the claim is chemical rather than cultural. The cost is built into the same sentence that describes the benefit. The condition that preserves the wood is the condition that keeps people away from it. 150 meters is not diving territory in any routine sense. Work at that depth is remote work, conducted through instruments and vehicles rather than by hand. That follows from the depth figure itself, rather than from any excavation report in this evidence pack. So the Black Sea offers archaeology a trade with no negotiation available. The better the preservation, the deeper the material, the more expensive and technically demanding every observation becomes. An archive that no one can open cheaply is still an archive, but its contents are released slowly, at the pace of survey budgets and equipment capability. Now the counterpoint, because this is where a lot of ocean mystery content goes wrong. A single depth figure and a single explanatory hypothesis do not license sweeping claims. The evidence available to me does not establish how many ancient wrecks exist in the Black Sea, how many sit below the oxygen boundary, what condition their timbers are in, or whether materials other than wood survive equally well. It also does not establish that 150 meters is a uniform surface across the whole basin. The record gives that depth as one where oxygen is insufficient to support most familiar life forms. Treating it as a fixed lid stretched flat across the sea would be my assumption, not documented fact. And Bascom's contribution, importantly, was a suggestion. The value of a suggestion lies in how well it survives testing, not in how confidently it is repeated. Where does that leave the picture today? On the evidence used for this episode, ancient wrecks in the Black Sea are documented, the anoxic deep water is documented as oxygen poor at depth, and the connection between those two facts remains the strongest available explanation rather than a closed case. What has genuinely changed is the question archaeologists ask about this particular sea. Before the anoxia argument, the reasonable expectation was that ancient wooden ships had long since been reduced to scattered, non-organic remains, and the search focused on what durable cargo survived. After it, the deep basin became a place where the ships themselves might still be described as ships. That is a different research program, with different instruments, different costs, and different kinds of answers. The lesson is narrower than the usual awe and more useful. The Black Sea's ancient wrecks are not evidence of lost technology, unknown civilizations, or anything beyond ordinary maritime history. They are evidence that preservation is a property of environments, not of objects, and that a chemical boundary in a water column can decide what a culture leaves behind. Bascom's 1976 reasoning was valuable precisely because it was modest and falsifiable. Identify the destructive agent, identify where that agent cannot live, and predict what should remain. Which raises the question that any careful viewer should be asking next: and that the evidence here cannot yet answer. How much of the archaeological record we treat as permanently lost was never destroyed by time at all, but by oxygen? Visual reconstructions are illustrative. Facts and interpretations are based on the sources listed in the description.